WFLD Flint.
Good evening at 6 p.m. and time now for Chia Use of Knowledge is Power broadcast with Dr. Marseille Wells-Strozier. Information on how to reach Chia will follow today's broadcast. And now, here's your host.
Hello and good evening, listeners. I'm so excited to be with you on this Wednesday night. It's pretty cold outside, so hopefully you're inside safe and warm, and you're going to be able to enjoy our 1 hour show tonight. This is our last show for 2018, and we're going out with a bang. How about that, Al?
I know that.
Al, you know, I'm going to miss you.
I'm going to miss
while
you
I'm
even
gone.
more.
Yes, we're planning on returning in April.
April?
Yeah, in April. We don't have an exact date yet, but we're working on it to return back in April with some of the.
I was reading one of your article in your paper, in your bulletin you had.
Which one? The Courier?
No. The one
the newsletter that made you famous?
Yeah, the newsletter.
There you go. All righty.
Yeah. And it says June. You won't be here no more in June.
Well, the organization that sponsors this, they're sponsoring it up until June 5th. I think June 5th is the last date of the funding period. Okay. But we have gone back to request for another year extension.
Okay. Fantastic.
So we're in the process of working that out. But until then, what'd you say?
I said, who?
Until then, we're going to come back in April. We'll be here in May, and then we'll be here just probably about 1 week of June until we get that approval.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
And not only are we trying to get approval to return back here to 1420 for another year, but we're also asking for an extension or for the opportunity to help us with the financial obligation for us to go to primetime television. Okay. We've been approached by NBC 25 and also CW. Okay. They have 2 slots. So we've been offered that opportunity. So we need sponsors, and we already have the guests. But we just need sponsorship so we can make it happen.
Coming up.
Yeah, coming up. On the rough side of the mountain.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. That's beautiful. Beautiful.
So, you know what, Al? Somebody posted something on Facebook, and he says, "What do you think I'm doing?" Guess what this man was playing with?
What?
A race car track, like a child's race car track.
Really?
Yes. So please tell us, Paul, what were you doing with a race car track this weekend?
Oh, you're a stupid head.
Oh, he posted up on there?
Yes, he posted it. And he was grinning and cheesing right next to it.
Really? I had a ball. What are you talking about? I was 8 years old all over again.
So what kind of race car track was it?
It was the race car track I wanted when I was 8 years old.
So was it the electric kind and the cars?
The AFX racetrack.
Oh, wow.
Back in the day.
Wow. You know what I said, Al? I said, are you playing with something most kids used to get a spanking with when they were little kids?
I know.
Sorry, with a race car track.
No, she's confused. That's Hot Wheels. I got my butt beat.
So tonight, listeners, again, we're going to have a 1 hour show for you tonight, and we have 2 wonderful guests. And one of the guests that we have is a co-host with me. Her name is Katie Stanley. She was with us like 2 weeks ago.
I think so.
Katie is a staff attorney and Flint Housing Education and Outreach Coordinator at Legal Service of Eastern Michigan Fair Housing Center. So how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. I'm glad you're back with me.
Me too.
I was excited when I said, would you co-host with me? And she said, yes. And then come to find out, this lady right here, Al, every organization that comes to this table on Wednesday night, I have some type of collaborative partnership with. And back in 2011, when we got our adult education component started, I met this woman. And since I've known this woman, this organization has been one of our funders for our Adult Education Center for the past 7 years. And and not only have they done that, one of their other staff members participated in a male youth after school program that we had. And he volunteered his personal time in order to help young men understand financial literacy. So, another bank that's good to Chia is Chemical Bank. And tonight I want to introduce to you Patricia Franklin-Lindsey. She is the Regional Community Development Manager, AVP for Chemical Bank, who has over 30 years experience in the banking industry. Pat has been an undeniable strong advocate for her community, serving low to moderate income individuals and families with affordable housing solutions, assist with economic development strategies, and revitalization projects. So, Pat, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I am so glad that you're here. Tonight we're going to talk about listeners' bankruptcy and your credit. If you'd like to participate in this conversation, please give us a call at 239-5733. Again, the number is 239-5733. So, Pat, let's get into this conversation. Define bankruptcy for our listeners.
Okay, bankruptcy simply is a term that's used for a person or individual or entity that cannot repay their debtors. Okay. So if you're not able to pay your creditors that you have, there's an actual way out for you, which is bankruptcy.
Okay. And what are the common forms of bankruptcy?
Some of the common forms I would say is a Chapter 7, a Chapter 13, and a Chapter 11.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about Chapter 7. What is Chapter 7?
Okay, a Chapter 7 is when you're allowed to liquidate all of your assets.
Okay, define liquidate.
Liquidate means they're going to come in and they usually will sell off anything that can be sold through an estate, possibly. You would have your home sold, your car sold. But in the state of Michigan, one of the great things is that we have some exemption laws which could protect some of those things from being liquidated.
Now, who comes in and do the liquidation?
Usually you would be appointed by a trustee, would be appointed to your case if you're able to file for Chapter 7. Not everyone qualifies.
Okay. Now, is there a certain dollar amount, or what is the qualification for you to file for Chapter 7?
Normally for a Chapter 7, you have to meet the state median income.
Okay.
And also, they have different fees and stuff that are applied based on your poverty level. They could be waived. But normally, I looked it up. So for the state of Michigan, their median income is about $67,300.
Okay. Alrighty. And what's our other form of bankruptcy?
You also have a Chapter 13. And with the Chapter 13, you're able to do a repayment plan. So that's when you're the trustee. First, I should say, before you can go into a Chapter 7, 11, or 13, you have to go through credit counseling. So you have to do some type of counseling first, and then they will determine whether or not which chapter you fit into. You don't go in and basically say, I want to file a 7 or a 13. It's going to be based on your circumstances.
So who provides the credit counseling here in Genesee County or just the Flint area?
In Genesee County, they do have credit counseling that's available over at Metro Community Development.
Okay.
That is for a small fee.
Oh, yeah, that is right. All their services aren't free anymore like they used to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's one opportunity you can have. Also, you can go to Green Path, and then you can always look up any credit counseling through the government website that they may have available.
Okay, so let's say if I decide that I need to file Chapter 7. What is the importance of going through financial literacy or a credit counseling program after I know I've already screwed up and I need to fix my credit?
Well,
I wasn't proactive. I was proactive.
A lot of times what we find is when individuals feel that they may be knee-deep in debt, and when we take a look at it, that's not necessarily the case. Okay. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting them on a proper budget so that they can, readjust some things, maybe cut off that cable or lower the cell phone bill, find ways to cut some of their other costs so that they can readjust their plan. And then maybe in that case, bankruptcy might not fit for you.
Okay.
Because there is a certain dollar amount that you have to file for bankruptcy. And it varies from $10,000 to $15,000 normally at minimum.
Okay. That's including That's excluding student loans.
You cannot bankrupt
Yes.
any type of federal debt. So if it's a federal student loan, you can't bankrupt it. If a tax lien, you cannot bankrupt it.
Although I can interject there. I have personally in my internship before I was even an attorney helped folks that were permanently and totally disabled. So if you get categorized as permanently and totally disabled, you can then discharge those federal student loans. Not the private Sally Mae loans. The young man that I was able to help had MS, lifetime MS.
Okay.
So it's things like that where you're going to be for the rest of your life, and it's determined by a doctor, and it's very hard to get that categorization.
Sure it is. Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Chapter 7, Chapter 11. Now, do you also have to go to credit counseling to file Chapter 13? Sorry, I didn't mean to say 11.
Chapter 13, you definitely have to go through a credit counseling because that's going to be the repayment plan. But the credit counseling will also help you with making sure you get all of your debt that you want to put into that bankruptcy and that you're aware of it. Because what we find is individuals will forget and leave something out. You can't go back in and add it once it's left out.
So up under Chapter 7, you can only file for a certain amount. Is that correct? Less than what you can for 13?
Well, under Chapter 7, you can file everything in that bankruptcy.
Okay. So why would a person, I'm just playing devil's advocate, why would a person want to file a 13, which is paying back, when they can file a 7 and don't have to pay back?
Because the decision between a 7 and a 13 will not be yours. The decision will be when you go to your bankruptcy attorney, or if you go over to Legal Services of Eastern Michigan and use one of their attorneys, they will assign you a trustee. And then during that process and your credit counseling, the determination will be made by the courts as to which one would best suit you.
Now, what if a person decides to file on their own?
You can also file on your own, but you still have to go before the courts. And the court is the one who would make that final determination as to if you're going to go into a 7 or 13.
If somebody wanted to call legal services, what is the process to contact legal services in order to go through the bankruptcy process?
I'm so glad you asked that. So our number is 1-800-322-4512. That's our general line. We serve 14 counties. So we have 3 offices, one here in Flint, one in Port Huron, one in Saginaw. If you don't get somebody, leave a voicemail. Generally, we're able to get back with people within 48 hours. We do an intake screening to make sure that they're eligible. Like Pat was saying, there are cases where things aren't dischargeable. There are cases where it may not be advisable, and I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, so I'm not going to go too deep into this topic.
Many questions.
But I will say there are cases where it's not advisable for them. So say you're in school and you're getting federal loans. That could affect your ability to get, if like your master's degree, those loans, graduate loans, grad plus loans are credit based. So if you're someone who's in the middle of a master's degree, we're not going to tell you to file bankruptcy because you may not be able to finish your degree. Things like that. There's places where, and I will say under a 13, there's reasons why your attorney may strategically file a 13 over a 7. One of them is to keep a home. If you have a home that you're trying to preserve, that you have a mortgage balance on. So things like that. But what the advocate will do is screen the person calling, make sure, it's something that they're eligible for. And then they'll assign them to our bankruptcy attorney, whatever office, because we have a couple. And then that person will move forward and help them decide which is the best.
Now, Pat, I'm not going to leave you out on this one because I want to ask a couple of questions to Katie. Katie, legal services, do you have to meet an income threshold in order to receive services from legal services?
Yeah, so not in all cases, but most cases our funding is through legal services corporations, and a lot of our the services that we provide are income based on the federal poverty levels, so within 150% in general. There's some exceptions that we're able to get waivers for where we can kind of spend people down if they've got fixed debts or medical bills, things like that. So we have certain asset limitations as well. But we do have certain grants, I will say, like before before I did Fair Housing, I was an attorney under the Victims of Crime Act, and I helped domestic violence victims as well as elder abuse victims.
Okay.
And those cases don't have income limitations. Our Fair Housing cases do not have any income restrictions around them. We have a grant in Shiawassee, Genesee, and Lapeer counties serving seniors where those don't have income and asset limitations. We can do wills, executive documents like powers of attorney, things like that for folks. We do a lot of ladybird deeds to help with the transfer of property at incapacity or death, things like that. So yeah, there are cases where we always encourage people to call, and because it's so case specific, there's a lot of ways we can get people in that, without saying it's just one thing.
Depending on the services, is it free?
It's all free.
It's all free.
Yes.
So if I want to come and get my will done and a power of attorney, medical power of attorney, I can get that done for free?
Only if you're over 60.
Okay, for those who are not over 60, what is the process of the protocol? I mean, how can I come there if I'm not over the age of 60 in order to get something like that done?
So we have a case management system that we're able to code all of our different funding sources, and they kind of change all the time. We get different grants and different funders like you do. So that, for instance, say you were someone that had a probate issue or an estate planning issue. In Flint, there are a lot of issues around folks that have passed away and the deeds weren't properly transferred in the chain of title. So now you have someone living in this home that's been there for a really long time, but the title is split between essentially a family tree and statutory and intestate succession. So we see a lot of things like that. But essentially, depending on what the funding is, so over 60 funding in Genesee, Shiawassee, Lapeer, that one's no income asset. But if you weren't, you'd have to meet those other guidelines, 150% of federal poverty, which I think is around, $16,000 a year or something for a single person right now.
So listeners, if you're over the age of 60, there is a service that's there for you if you're going to be doing will planning.
Wills, powers of attorney, so that includes medical and financial powers of attorney, springing medical and financial powers of attorney. So say you don't want to have anyone that is immediately in control of your executive functions, but in the event that you were incapacitated, that would spring into effect. That's why they're called that. So you can do things like that where you're planning around, we're all kind of in this gradual process of
we are
getting older.
There.
So
Yeah. I turned 50, Al. Sunday. Yeah, Sunday. I was thinking about it. Yeah, Sunday I did.
Don't you believe that? That girl's 60 years old.
60 years old.
Well, you know what? If I was 60,
you'd be getting a will.
I'd be getting my will done for free.
Now, I will say, a little caveat, you can go online and look up the statutory will on our government website. I don't know the exact URL. I'm not prepared for that, but you can fill out a statutory will.
Now, define a statutory will.
It's just like a form. So there's like Michigan Legal Help is a great resource. I don't know if they have statutory will forms on there, but it's just a form that the state of Michigan provides for folks that want to lay out a will. You can also do something called a holographic will. So as long as it's in your own handwriting, it was witnessed, you were competent at the time, you understood the nature and the bounty of your assets. These are elements of what a valid will is. And you sign it in your own hand, or there's ways that you can make a will that doesn't necessarily have to be, this really big, complicated process.
Yeah.
But if we always encourage people to get advice because it can be difficult to navigate.
Now, if you decide to do it on your own, like you're recommending or you're giving some information on, does it have to be notarized by someone, by a notary?
No, it just has to be witnessed.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to have, there's a statutory requirement of witnesses, and that person, and I'm trying to remember now because I don't practice in this area like I used to, but there's, I think it's two, I want to say, witnesses, and they can be the signor and the Pat's shaking her head, so I feel like
Pat
she knows the answer to this. I don't do a whole lot of wills and fair housing.
Right. No, we do a lot of notaries because a lot of individuals would just come in and get it notarized just to make sure that it's valid.
Yep.
And it's not as contestable if it's witnessed that it's signed in front of you in front of a notary versus a friend or a family member.
And we are notaries at legal, most of us. I'm an attorney, but I'm also a notary. So we do that service for people. We have a self-help center that people can come in if they don't have access to like the internet or computers or whatever it might be. They can come in and use that to look that up. And we can answer questions around intestate succession. Michigan has the EPIC statutes, which outline the order in which your property will be disposed. And there's like a certain statutory scheme to it, what people and who it'll be and how it'll go.
Listeners, I do know that a lot of people don't have wills. They may not be interested in wills, but the benefit of a will is to protect your assets, to ensure that they go to the right individuals so they don't get tied up in probate court. What would be another advantage of someone having a will?
Well, if you don't want it to go in that intestate succession. So, and then also there's things that might be a little more complicated, like the custody of your children, which even if you outline that in your will is going to still go through towards the best interest of the child, what's called the best interest factors. So there are things that are more complex where people want to make sure that what they want, is what happens in the end. But it's really interesting, the case law around it, because there's a lot of cases where certain things are allowed to be disposed of and planned and others aren't, and they're still like, it's interesting.
I'm learning as I grow more in the not-for-profit world. I know organizations that ask for people to incorporate their organizations within an individual's will. How often are those type of things contested by the children if the parent decide to leave money? Let's say if they decide to leave their money to us, the Center for Higher Educational Achievement. How often or can that be contested by the children if the parent leave majority of all the assets or the money to a not-for-profit or something?
So you could do something, and this is, again, I don't practice, none of our clients have money for the most part,
That's true.
This doesn't come up a whole lot. But you can do something in what's called a charitable trust that will put your things essentially in. And there's, like I said, there's certain elements around all of these things that you just have to achieve these certain things, and it has to be in that certain statutory scheme. So if you talk to an attorney that understands it, they'll be able to explain a little better how to make sure that your things go where they need to go. But no, that's totally possible.
Okay. No, Katie, I guess you could tell I'm getting ready to get in that planning stage in my will. Actually, I've had the paperwork for quite some time to complete my will and my medical power of attorney. The medical power of attorney is basically done. I just need to have a person to sign off on it. But the will, that's where I'm kind of stuck at because of my age. We don't know when we're going to leave this earth. I can drop dead before I leave out of here and don't have a will in place. So, Pat, maybe you can answer this. What would be a good age for an individual to put a will together?
Basically, I would say any age, as long as you're above the age of 18, is a good time. Because at the point in time that you start to acquire assets, you want to make sure that they're passed on to someone that you really know that's going to sometimes take care of it or be a good steward over it. And what we see in banking a lot, you can either do that or just have beneficiaries in place. So that's another option as well. So if you don't have a lot of assets where you think you need a will, you can have a ladybird deed, which we always say is the best type of deed to have because it still gives you ownership of your home while you're living. And then once you pass away, the beneficiaries drop into place at that time.
Now, define ladybird deed.
I want to say, too, a huge benefit of a ladybird deed over a quitclaim is that quitclaims cannot be revoked. Ladybird deeds can. So say, something happens where, God forbid, you and the person, the other grantee on the deed, they're no longer, we have some clients where it's not safe for them to be in the same home as the grantee anymore, and they can't get them off because they've done a quit claim and it's not revocable without consent of both parties who have an equal interest.
Well, go back for our listeners, and not just the listeners, for myself. What is a ladybird?
Okay. Katie Mike can correct me if I'm not sure, but a ladybird deed basically is a deed that you have in present time, which allows the homeowner to stay the 100% homeowner as long as they're living.
Okay.
And when they pass away, they need to present a death certificate. And at that point in time, the appointees or beneficiaries that they have assigned will go into place on that mortgage. And then they now will become the owners of those homes.
Okay.
And from what Katie had just mentioned, you can also change that throughout the lifetime. So if you have someone that you put on your home when you're 30, when you first buy it, and you want to change that person when you're 50, you can go in and make those changes without having to have them sign off of your deed, because at that point they're not owners until you pass away.
Got it. Got it. What'd you think about this? What are you doing over there? You're not paying attention to my show tonight?
I am thinking about how I'm going to take you out.
Wait a minute. Have you thought about putting all these things in place, or how are you coming with your...
I just turned into a corporation. So within the corporation, I have given my kids as partners in the corporation access to all my wealth.
Okay.
And my traffic tickets.
Your debt too, huh?
Yeah, all the debt too.
Al, have you been thinking about this type of planning?
Yes, I have, but I haven't got to the point to where I have a bank account that's got more than $100 and some in it.
It doesn't always have to be finances, but it can be assets.
It can be assets. It could be your vehicle. It could also be your home. And even if you have a bank account or a safe deposit box, it's always good to have a second party name on there, because if something happens to you, a safe deposit box is one of the hardest things to get in, because you first have to be able to tell someone what the value is. If you've never been in there, you have no clue.
Yes.
Well,
So
I don't have to worry about it, because my wife, she's signed on everything.
I remember those safe deposit boxes when I was a little girl. My grandfather used to belong to Citizen Bank. And I never forget how they were open up the gates, and you'll be able to go in there. He'll take his box out and sit down. God knows what he had in there. But another thing too, Paul, I know you said something sarcastic, but Paul,
It was funny.
from a business perspective, this is something that I was taught. For important backups of computer data or specific papers relating to our organizations, it's good to store that in a safe deposit.
Right.
yes.
Opposed to having it at home and probably in a security lockbox.
Right.
So, what do you think?
But you have to have multiple copies. So you have one copy in your safe deposit box, one under your pillow, one in the bread box.
That's too many copies. That's too many
Well, I mean,
copies.
at least there's supposed to be 2 copies outside of your house, because it's like your house catches on fire and both copies are gone. So you mean you're supposed to keep one at mom's house or, somewhere else. And
Yeah.
you should do that at least every 6 months.
Do all banks have safe deposit boxes?
Majority of the banks have safe deposit boxes. Not every branch may have safe deposit boxes, because as we get into this new age with banking changing, safe deposit boxes is not something so much that they're putting in those facilities, because they're made so that you can just walk right up to a station like this desk here and be able to perform whatever you're doing in a more comfortable setting.
Okay.
Self-service, fee-based profits for banking. Right?
If that's what you say.
He's just mad how much his race car set costs.
Yeah. Who did you will that to?
Yeah, who are you going to will that to?
You know it's going to be a fight.
I don't know who's gonna fight. Me and Katie will be there to see who'll fight over it.
We have a great connection now. I feel like I would get the race car track.
And we work on this Sally Mae deed over here.
that one.
That's right.
You're wrong for that
I had to
one.
look this up to make sure, but Lady Bird deeds were actually named for, I couldn't remember which president it was.
Lady Bird Johnson.
Yes, but Lady Bird Johnson. President Johnson was the first one to do that for
Yes.
his wife. So,
Yes.
so that's where we get that. It's kind of a special thing to Michigan, too. They don't have them everywhere, so.
Wow, isn't that something?
Yeah.
Are you serious? Really? Wow. This went by so fast.
No, it's only half.
That's only half.
Oh,
We're still
but
here.
Still.
This is a season finale.
Listeners, if you're interested in this conversation about bankruptcy and your credit, please give us a call at 239-5733. Again, the number is 239-5733. I've been told that for our first 30 minutes, we are done for tonight. But I want to tell you, thank you so much for our viewers for giving me your time during these past 7 months. For our listeners on 1420, we'll be right back.